So Neville had this wonderful lecture that he gave called Changing the Feeling of I. He starts off by saying, "For the benefit of those who were not present last Sunday, just let me give you a quick summary of the thought expressed here. We claimed that the world was a manifestation of consciousness, that the individual's environment, circumstances, and conditions of life were only the outpicturing of the particular state of consciousness in which the individual abides. Therefore, the individual sees whatever he is by virtue of the state of consciousness from which he views the world. Any attempt to change the outer world before he changes the inner structure of his mind is to labor in vain." And so now this is where all the power is, literally, in the acceptance. As he says, the environment, circumstances, and conditions were only the outpicturing of the particular state of consciousness in which the individual abides. And so now is where all the power is. And that means, regardless of the current environment, circumstances, and conditions, we get to choose the feeling of I. And by this it is meant what I feel as real now. And so the question is, what do I feel as real in regards to the current appearances, which are the environment, circumstances, and conditions of life? Do I feel as real as how I desire it to be? Or do I feel as real as how I do not desire it to be? That's a personal choice. It is actually from a neutral acceptance, and by that I mean, not that I do not wish to see them appear differently, but rather releasing identification to that former state so I could feel as real now how I desire to be and thus operate from that desired state. So we distinguish our true self, which is the I, and the state, which is occupied, which is the feeling referred to here. What we are feeling as real now represents the state that has been occupied now. He says, and so we start with the I. Most of us are totally unaware of the self that we really cherish. We have never taken a good look at the self, so we don't know the self. For the I has neither face, form, nor figure, but it does mold itself into structure by all that it consents to, all that it believes. And few of us know really what we do believe. We have no idea of the unnumbered superstitions and prejudices that go to mold this inner formless I into form, which is then projected as environment and conditions of life. So whether one considers it as true or not that most of us are aware of this self or not, the truth remains the same. The formless I, which is our true essence, has fused itself with all that it believes, which makes up the environment and conditions of life. And so how do we change the environments and conditions of our life if desired? Well, he says here. And now, how do we go about changing the I? First, we must discover the I, and we do this by an uncritical observation of self. I recommend my video I did recently on self-inquiry. I'll put a link in the description to that video, and I trust you'll find that to be helpful. Then you start changing the self after. By an uncritical observation, you make the discovery of that self. For the acceptance of self is the essence of the moral problem of the world. It is the epitome of a true outlook on life, for it is the sole cause of everything you observe. So the self transcends the state. It transcends the beliefs, the body, the mind, and also the environments and conditions that one has identified with through their mind, which in its essence is pure. And so now from this pure awareness, we see what we have accepted as true, as he says here next. Your description of the world is a confession of the self that you do not know. You describe another, you describe society, you describe anything, and your description of the thing you observe reveals to one who knows this law the being you really are. So it's helpful then to take some notes or to journal or take an inventory in some shape or form of how we describe another, society, or describe anything as we go about our lives, as our description of these areas, which also includes environment, conditions, and circumstances, reveals to one who knows this law the being they really are. And this is done without shame or condemnation. The goal here is to not look at these areas and shame or condemn, but rather choose how we desire from now, as in this moment now, is the moment to shape the formless I, as he says here. I start with the self, having discovered, and start with the change of that self. So, the changing of the feeling of I is a selective thing, because unnumbered states are infinite states, but the I is not the state. The I believes itself to be the state when it enters and fuses with it. You could wear a feeling until it's natural. The moment the feeling becomes natural, it will begin to bear fruit within your world. So now we wear the feeling by suggesting to ourselves that we already are the person that we desire to be now in regards to the inventory. So any area that once showed up that we would not consider ideal, we reimagine ourselves by simply not accepting anything less than ideal as true, as you are truly ideal now, and thus all that you desire to be now. The inventory, as mentioned, is revealed while relating with ourselves, relating with others, society, anything that he said, and we choose to remain in the feeling of being what we desire to be now, regardless of how those appearances were interpreted, because to desire a state is to already have it, and then it's felt as natural. This is how one got to the point where they are now anyways. By doing this, although perhaps accepting as true what is not actually true to how they are ideally. So now they can repeat the process, only with attributes of how they desire to be ideally. He says, if you see all things are now, you don't become, you simply accept the state that you would occupy. Occupying it, you seem to become, but it is already a fact. Every aspect of the state in its most minute detail. It's worked out and taking place. You, by occupying the state, seem to go through the action of unfolding the state. But the state is completely finished and taking place. So now you can choose the being you want to be. And by choosing a being other than what you are now expressing, you start the change of the feeling of I. So now once we occupy the state by feeling it as real now, this is the part where we release control and operate automatically from that state. And one may fluctuate through states all day long. If this is the case, return to the state by feeling it as real now, and it becomes the dwelling place, remaining in and operating from the feeling which corresponds to the state. This means feeling it as real now, and then, as he says, we seem to, or we could say it appears that way, to go through the action of unfolding the state. This is because creation is complete. We are occupying states by what we feel as real, like the title of his lecture where I pulled these notes from, called Changing the Feeling of I. And so how do we know if we're in our chosen state? He says, now how will I know that I changed the feeling of I? By beginning first with an uncritical observation of my reactions to life, and then noticing my reactions when I think I am identified with my choice. If I assume that I am the man that I want to be, let me observe my reactions. If they are as they were, I have not identified myself with my choice, for my reactions are automatic. And so if I am changed, I would automatically change my reactions to life. So the changing of the feeling of I results in a change of reaction, which change of reaction is a change of environment and behavior. So we notice our environments have changed, behaviors have changed, how we relate to others, how they relate to us has changed, and more specifically, what is related to our chosen state in any shape or form appears even to the most minute detail that the change of the feeling of I has been initiated. And then he also says, but let me warn you, a little alteration of mood is not a transformation, because as I change my mood for the moment, it can quickly and rapidly be, I would say, replaced by another mood in the reverse direction. So now from initiating the change of state, as mentioned, by accepting that you already are what you desire to be now, we then remain in the feeling and go through the action of unfolding the state representing the real transformation. So if as a result of appearance, you allow your mood to be altered, acknowledge that you are truly formless and thus unaffected, and you'll remain in your chosen state, as he said in the beginning. The I has neither face, form, nor figure, but it does mold itself into structure by all that it consents to, all that it believes. So in any moment, if there's about to be reactivity into a different state, we remain in the chosen state by accepting that we are truly beyond identification to the appearances. This allows the alteration of mood, which is your chosen state, to be a real transformation, which is a real change of consciousness. That way, as he says, it can't be quickly and rapidly replaced by another mood in the reverse direction. He says, when I say that I was changed, as the gentleman changed his mood, his basic mood, his state of consciousness, it means that having assumed that I am what the moment denied, what my reason denied, that I remain in the state long enough to make the state stable, so that all of my energies are flowing from that state. I am no longer thinking of the state, I'm thinking from the state. So that wherever a state grows so stable as to definitely expel all of its rivals, then that central, habitual state of consciousness from which I think defines my character and is really a true transformation or change of consciousness. So a few key insights here I'd like to further discuss. Number one, it means that having assumed that I am what the moment denied, what my reason denied, that I remain in the state long enough to make the state stable. Number two, I am no longer thinking of the state, I'm thinking from the state. And number three, so that wherever a state grows so stable as to definitely expel all of its rivals, then that central habitual state of consciousness from which I think defines my character and is really a true transformation or change of consciousness. So number one, if a person goes to the end and accepts that they are all that they desire to be now, if they're met in mind with reason-based questions, it's totally fine. No shame or condemnation. What we're doing here could be considered a radical transformation for some, a metanoia, a radical change of mind. So if mental reasoning seems to deny, which I don't believe it does, as everything can be rebutted, remember what he said once, quoting from the 55th chapter of Isaiah, "Your ways are not my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways." So do not ask how it's going to be done. All I have to do is completely yield to this being within me, for he has ways and means I at this level of my being know not of. So you don't need to know how things will happen. This is faith, which is loyalty to the unseen reality, which was his lecture where this quote was from. Now the second part, I'm no longer thinking of the state, I'm thinking from it. This is where inner dialogue or inner voice shows up in relation to whatever shows up, which I consider to be of a higher reason, is inwardly connecting the dots between appearances and the state, and everything makes sense to us. Like for example, a person might say when relating with another, it is fine if they didn't respond to my email, the deals are going to go through as planned. I consider that thinking from my chosen state. Whereas if they're thinking of the state rather than from it, they may say they didn't respond to the email, this means the business is not going to work out, or something like that. Finally, number three we have where he says, so that wherever a state grows so stable as to definitely expel all of its rivals, then that central, habitual state of consciousness from which I think defines my character and is really a true transformation or change of consciousness. It means that your chosen state has become your dwelling place. Again, you may notice yourself not being reactive, people relating favorably, environments and conditions, as he mentioned, relating favorably. These are all symbolic reflections of a true transformation or change of consciousness, which represents thinking from, or we could say operating from, the state. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I accept that all I desire is already mine, and I feel it as real beyond appearances, which transforms accordingly as I remain in to think and operate from this state, appearing to go through the action of unfolding the state, representing real transformation everywhere I appear to be. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.